Hey everyone, this is Kush and Arvind. With the new season starting in a few days, actually next week, with the Community Shield, we thought it would be good to kind of start this platform wherein we talk about what's going on, not just the Premier League, but the world of football across leagues. Share our thoughts, get insights from all of you football fans like us, and really kind of keep up with all that's going on in the world. We've been passionate football fans for like decades now. Both Man United fans, so you can imagine what the last decade or so has been for us. But honestly, again, with every season, I keep telling myself like this seems to be the most exciting Premier League season coming up with just the kind of competitiveness across the league, not just the top four or top six that you typically see in most leagues across Europe. So while we're going to talk a lot about the Premier League because it's our favorite, but like yeah, we'll obviously be focusing on other leagues in the Champions League when the time arrives. But with that, glad to have you on board, Arvind, and really looking forward to kind of doing this on a weekly basis. Just breaking down what we're seeing every week. In the world of football and talking tactics, players, coaches, everything. So yeah, thanks for doing this and yeah, looking forward to making this a weekly thing.
Likewise, Kush. Hey, everyone! Like, really excited to be doing this with Kush. In just in terms of like the kind of tone of the show, I think both Kush and I really, kind of enjoy the game, enjoy talking about tactics, kind of digging a bit deeper, seeing like patterns emerge. In terms of the ways in which teams are playing, as well as like new tactics, like inverted fullbacks, inverted center backs, like trying to call things before they actually happen. Sometimes we'll be right, sometimes be wrong. That's a part of the journey in terms of how we're thinking about it. I was just like kind of smiling as Kush was saying, this year, every year seems like it's going to be the most exciting year, and kind of reminds me 10 years ago, Liverpool fans are a lot like that in terms of every year is going to be their year. I don't think this is going to be United's year in terms of winning anything, like at least like the top two prizes that I think that a club like of United stature should be aiming for. But I think like green shoots are already visible from like the Ineos regime. So
Right.
hopefully good times forward.
Yeah, and that's where I'd like to start. And just before we go further, I'm not delusional. I didn't mean to say that I was excited about this being a big year for us. Like, I don't think that's happening either. I think top four is a successful year for United. I meant just in general, given like the Villas, the West Hams, the Palaces, the Spurs. Like
Mhm.
again, it's going to be so competitive with every year, and like again, for all you know, City might just run away with it at the end of the day. But I just feel as a collective, as a league, I think all squads are improving and it's just such an exciting time to be following the league, right?
Totally agree. Yeah.
Right. So going back to what you just brought up with Ineos, the new footballing structure, this is their first summer at the helm of the footballing operations. So just to kick things off, I know it's fairly early days, but what have you made of the moves they've made so far in terms of, again, that announcement to refurbish Carrington, which has been a talking point for so long, getting in a new coaching setup, which I thought was important with the likes of Benny McCarthy, Steve McLaren, even Mitchell van der Gaag leaving, and we're getting like first team coaches now, right? With like Ruud van Nistelrooy, Rene Haak into the fold, and new goalkeeping coach as well. So I think there's a lot of moves being made so far. A couple of transfers that we've seen come through the door. One already out on a long-term injury, as luck would have it. But what have you made of those initial moves and the steps that they've taken as the head of the footballing operations, Manchester United?
I think that's a great summary, like you just laid out there, right? Like top line is it's been hugely positive, right? When the Glazers came to the club 2 decades ago, like we had the best coaching staff pretty much anywhere in Europe. We had the best stadium in England at least, and the best training ground in England. 2 decades of lack of investment is not going to be kind of undone immediately, but I think like it's very obvious that there's a vision, and that I think is the biggest difference with Ineos coming in. Like they have at least something that they're aiming towards. We basically had years of like, if I kind of lean on my consulting background, strategic drift, right? Like nobody really knew where you're going. You're trying stuff, nothing really made sense together. Complete short-termism, like whatever is going to like get more clicks on the internet. That's a bad idea for a podcast long term, and it's definitely a bad idea for a football club long term. That's been the most refreshing thing about Ineos, right? Just the way in which they've operated. Nobody can question that we have like a really good quality structure with professionals that genuinely demand and command respect. That's a huge change, number one. The second thing that's been hugely refreshing is just like the speed with which they moved on transfers, right? It's not like sometimes I got the sense with the old regime, if I could even call it that, like they almost like dragging things out, got more clicks, got more engagement. It was not about the footballing side of things. And the way in which we moved for Euro, whether it's going to work out or not in the long term, and as luck would have it with the long-term injury, like you said,
Yeah.
it's just refreshing to see that in a week they had a really clear idea and they were able to go out and execute it, right? So I think like the vision is there. They've already shown signs on execution. I think the third thing is they've realized that the rot starts from the top, but often fixes need to start from the bottom. And one of the most important things is like if you want to maximize, and I know Brailsford and like the team has always been about like eking out incremental
Yeah.
improvements.
Yeah.
Well, having a good training ground that people want to come into and it's top quality is not even an incremental improvement. It's a basic of
Yeah.
being a top quality sporting organization. So those three have been the biggest things that have like stood out. Obviously, it's still very early days, but just having those things visible even from the outside and in the very first summer, whether you agree with every single decision or not. Like for example, I don't know if like cutting X 100 jobs is going to make a difference.
250. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
Saves
in
us
some
10
ways
million.
like it wasn't even like all those roles, if I could read properly, were like just fluff, right? Some of these people have like been part of the club um, and contributed to its success, right, for many, many years. So like there's like some questionable decisions that they'll have to answer to. But I think in general, if you take a step back, zoom out and try to parse out what they've done, I think it's been pretty positive. That's my read. What about you, Kush?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of positives, right? I think we've been as fans of the club, I think we've honestly just had frustrating summer after frustrating summer, just in terms of how some of these deals have taken so long to conclude, transfer targets that sometimes I often wonder were just picked up from Twitter or what fans were talking about, where we just go in for a player last minute, or if a club's dropped the ball on a transfer, we're there kind of willing to pay those crazy wages. Um, I do feel like they've gone in with more of a plan in terms of these are the players we have. I'm assuming timeline set to make these deals, and we have a plan A, we have a plan B. And I again just reading up on like some of the articles on the Athletic in terms of how the Euro transfer was done. It was very strategic in terms of where Matt Hargreaves came in, where Jason Wilcox came in, where Omar Barada came in. I felt like that, and maybe I'm reading too much into these things, and maybe it's just like, oh, there's new people involved. We're trying to like, over rationalize some of this and getting carried away. But I do feel just given their experience in the market, they're bringing all of that to the fold, and something we've been lacking for years, right? Just that know-how, just that acumen in terms of getting these deals over the line, which everything said and done, things have kind of slowed down in terms of like this delay. Mazraoui kind of like this double deal has taken a while. Ugarte is also at a standstill. So the truth is, United traditionally have had it difficult in the transfer market, right? Like there's a perception around how much we're willing to pay. We have our obvious PSR constraints right now, and we've kind of set bad precedents for ourselves. That I don't think that can be undone in a day. I don't think that can be undone in a transfer window as well. Like, the kind of wages some of these players are on, Ineos can't fix that in a window. So a lot of the hate or like a lot of the frustration that I see with fans after a couple of weeks of no real major activity, I'm like, guys, like we need to be patient. Some of these players are on mega deals, and it's not easy to offload these players, right? So I want to give them time. I think so far the things I'm seeing in terms of getting the right people in, creating a culture that fosters performance based, like again, performance based improvements, and like really kind of creating a culture of winning, which is not going to happen overnight. But I feel like they're laying the groundwork for that, right? It's not like Liverpool. Like, I mean, sure, we lost 3-0 to Liverpool yesterday, but that's a very different story. I like Slot. I think he's. I'm dreading how good Liverpool could be this year, but we'll get into that later. But again, like we're really, I think, for even the next couple of transfer windows in that stage of rebuilding, breaking down the squad, getting players off the books, getting new ones in, building on that strategy that we have for the first team and how we play as a football club in general. It's going to take a while, but I think I can be patient as a fan when I see people with the requisite acumen making those calls. Like I feel I can get behind that. And that's my stance right now. I think they've made some good decisions. I think backing Ten Hag after whatever happened last year was a good call eventually. And I think I'm excited going into this. I'm excited to see how we play, how who we get in. And I just want us to be competitive again, which we want. But I think this regime could get us there in the short to long term. Right? I think that's in a nutshell how I feel. A lot of positive, but I think that will come. That would have to be balanced out with patience, which I'm ready to give this group because they've proved in the short time that they mean business.
Yeah, I think
Right?
that's really fair. Rome wasn't built
Right.
in a day.
Yeah.
Can wait.
Let us know your thoughts as well, people. Like again, just so many conflicting opinions. There's just a lot of like trigger happy people on the internet. So I read like, oh, where are the deals happening? Like, we're already in August. Uh, so I get there's like a dialogue on both sides of the fan base, but curious to know your thoughts. Um, I guess the next thing that I really wanted to talk about today was in terms of the squad, right? Like I think obviously part of a similar discussion, but like there needs to be a lot of change. Like we need more depth. Like we've seen with injuries, the minute we lose like a first team player, that drop in quality is so massive that the team just can't play the way we'd like Ten Hag coaching staff would like them to play. So in terms of squad, where do you think we're at? And what do you think we'll need to kind of get ourselves to fighting again, right? Because I don't think we're there yet. Like even with the transfers that we're talking about this season, I don't see us really competing with the City or Arsenal, even Liverpool for that matter. So curious to know where you think our squad is as things stand, and what transfers you think could make a difference come September.
It's an interesting question simply because I think like there's where you think the squad is, and if people could remain fit versus where you think the squad is, given like our history of injuries and what we're seeing as the current of injuries as well, right? Because you could look at some of those areas and say, we've got enough folks there or enough bodies there, but the bodies are always in the treatment room. I don't think it's helpful, right? So I think
Right.
there's like kind of the dual question that's there, and that's one of the big pieces. I think you need players. We need to think of also bringing in players who are actually available, right? Who have like a history of availability. Of course, that all goes out the window once they join United. Like Euros never had like injuries, for example,
Yeah.
before of his very short career to go on. So kind of I would say so like center back, center midfield probably are the two biggest areas. Ideally, you'd want one more striker, but the sense I'm getting is that we're going to play some kind of narrow, 4-2-2-2,
Yeah.
so that you could potentially get away with like, Bruno being one of those like false nines as a striker. So they might be slightly more, and maybe Rashford as well if you're playing particularly narrow there.
Right.
So I'd say center back and center midfield are probably the two big ones. Um, you know, Clearly the Mazraoui, can play both left back and right back, which also is helpful as Wan-Bissaka goes. It's both kind of a
Yeah.
1:1 swap, but also it means that you can continue having a left back, just given like Malacia seems like it's going to take a bit more time. And of
Don't
course,
discount Amas.
I was going to say, of course, the emergence of like Amas, who looks a serious player, like just like it's just a touch and kind of the game intelligence and the comfort of the ball is just kind of quite extraordinary. So I'm very excited about that. So yeah, those would be my biggest positions, and I think we basically need Ugarte for sure, maybe even another center midfielder, maybe on the cheap or on a free, right? Like I think might be needed.
Right.
And similarly, I think we might also need like another center back as well, right? I think that was like probably something we might need to bring in apart from just Delict. But I think that's probably going to be a function of like what happens to Lindelof and Maguire, both of
Yeah.
whom don't have a ton of interest right now.
Yeah. I think that's where I come in as well, right? Like I feel this like we need to sell well. I think I almost wouldn't mind if we focus the next week or so getting players off the books, because and I think that romanticizing some of the players that we have on the squad like McTominay and Wan-Bissaka, I like them as players. I just don't think they're the players that take us to the next level, right?
Yeah.
McTominay is a great squad player and he proved it with his goals last year, but I feel like we almost have to be ruthless in a way and potentially sacrifice some of those goals to figure out what that next step is for our squad, right? We can't keep again. I see this revisionism around like Wan-Bissaka, and like he has his qualities. I just don't think the way Ten Hag wants to play, the way our teams are set up, like he's
And it's not what
right
you need every single week either,
exactly.
right? Like that's the thing. You don't need somebody to shut down a top player every single week. That's not how the game works.
So that's where I come in, wherein like for me, it's really about how we sell in the next couple of weeks. To kind of trim our squad, just and again that comes with all the injury problems we have. But I feel like again that frees up a lot of weight space that like removes all of the problems that you have with a bloated squad, and that gives you the opportunity to add new faces. Because I feel like I would rather have Lindelof and maybe even Maguire off the books. I don't see Maguire going this summer, but I would potentially have both of them gone, get De Ligt and maybe potentially another player in that position, right? Even if they're slightly raw. Because I feel like Lisandro on just Ten Hag prefers like left-footed centre backs in that LCB position. So Braithwaite would have been ideal, and then getting either Euro or De Ligt would have worked out well, but like that won't happen. So I feel like maybe that's another position we need to fill, because Shaw typically deputizes for Lisandro Martinez at times. Like we've seen that over the last couple of years, but that can't be a long-term solution, right? As a second
And
choice.
he's somebody who can't stay fit himself. Like,
Exactly.
and I really rate him. I think when a fit Shaw is one of the best left backs in Europe. It's
Absolutely.
just that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, so for me, it's really, I think if we get this double deal done with Bayern, and potentially add a Ugarte, I love Zubimendi. Like just that orchestrator sort of player in the middle of the park. I don't know how that works well with Menu. So like Ugarte, like as a breaker, would probably work well. I don't know, but like one of those two I see like would be great additions to that midfield. And maybe like even getting an Ericsson off, if that means like we have the funds to get that player of that level, right? Because right now it might be difficult to land even Ugarte for that matter, given what
Yeah.
PSG's are.
I wouldn't have minded like us like getting Ericsson out of the door and getting like a Guido Rodriguez in, for example, right? Like a six who is a sitter, who's played at the top level, comes with
Yeah,
experience, not a long-term solution, kind of gives us like the equivalent of what Endo provided
right.
Liverpool. And then I would want to honestly go back for somebody like Wharton, who I think long-term will become a six and would be an
Yeah,
incredible pairing with Mino in the middle. Just don't
yeah,
have the funds for
yeah.
that this year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, right? Like it comes down to like probably making, and it's sad that we keep saying this, like it's a stopgap year, this still feels like that given the kind of ridiculous spending we've done over the last 5 or 6 years, which has got us in this position. But that's the reality of where we are. So I feel like, again, just getting that stopgap, even like if it's an Amrabat kind of loan deal,
Hmm.
getting that for this year so that we have backup in midfield, and then going again, prioritizing that position next year when we're hopefully in a better place. But just while you were talking, I think again we're on the same page with the forward line. I know it needs additions. Anthony needs to. I still feel it needs to be moved out at some point. Um, but I feel like I think this is what we're going to get this year, right, with that front line. But I wanted to get your thoughts. You touched upon Guido, like, but what do you think? What teams do you think have stood out for you in the transfer market so far? Because West Ham certainly with Guido, and then Fulkrug as well, giving them that focal point. That again they've sometimes struggled with when Antonio's not really performing. He is quite patchy. I think that gives them a good option, and I think they've been smart in the market. Even if they get Van Bissaka, I think that's the kind of player that would suit their system that Lopetegui's potentially going to play. So West Ham definitely stands out. Any other teams that you think are making the right moves in the market this summer?
Yes, the one I think on everybody's lips is obviously Villa, right?
Yeah,
The only question mark there is like Onana's a good player. I really rate him actually, and I could have seen him do a pretty good job at United as well. They've obviously lost Douglas Luiz, who I think is a bit more important in their system than people might realize. He's kind of that profile, right? That like 6'8" hybrid that's very rare to find in the market nowadays. And they might have some issues. I think in the Champions League, they'll still do pretty well in the league, is my sense. But I think
right.
they've done pretty well, just given the constraints. Getting Diaby out and getting the money they did for him, I think is still like a pretty solid deal. It's not probably a deal they wanted to do, but I think it gives like it's a kind of like dispassionate decision making that makes sense for a long-term club that
Yeah,
you were alluding to.
yeah,
So they're probably one of the teams that I think have done well. I think Brighton as well, like Matt Sweefer, like that guy is a serious player. He's actually
yeah,
the one I would have tried to go for if we wanted a six. And it's I know, and I would have loved another player from Eredivisie like that you're bringing in, like, but he's actually a serious player, and he was very good in that Feyenoord system. Played a six, very good in the air, 6'2". Those are probably the two clubs that really have stood out to me. I think with Brentford, like these are the clubs that you typically think about, right, as doing well in the. I think they're
right.
just waiting to see what's going to happen with the Tony situation before they move. But like I think for me, it's been Brighton probably number one, and then
Yeah,
which is unlike most years, followed by Villa. But like there's that question mark around how they do in the in this Champions League.
Right. No, that makes sense. I think it's been quite summers for some of the bigger clubs. Whether it's City, Liverpool again have been pretty quiet, but they have a decent squad like going into the season. Arsenal, I thought, have been again. I think Arsenal are at that stage where it's like one addition or two additions every summer, and that's such a good place to be. And that's hopefully we'll
Yeah.
get there in the next year or so. But Arsenal look like a solid team that again are going to go for that title again. So uh, definitely quieter on like with the bigger teams have not really like it's not been a busy market, but some really smart deals by the likes of Villa, West Ham, and Brighton. Something we've again seen over the last few years, right? Like the smaller teams going out and making those smart buys, which is why they are where they are, right? So with that in mind, again, with just these movements being made in the transfer market and how the squads are shaping up, still fairly early days, probably too early to be talking about this, but do you have any thoughts for teams that you think are going to be vying for that top four or pushing for the league top six maybe? What are your thoughts, initial thoughts with the squads as they stand?
Yeah, no, it's the question that everybody wants to hear the answer to and probably has a strong opinion on. Well, I think City and Arsenal are certs, right? I don't
Yeah,
think there's any world in which they drop out.
yeah,
I actually think this Liverpool team has been built with the view of bringing somebody in like Slot who's going to kind of evolve their style of play a bit more so than Klopp, I think. Like honestly, I
yeah,
think like there were other players that might have been made a bit more sense that they wanted to buy in the last couple of seasons if just for Klopp in particular. I
yeah,
think they'll probably end up third, is my sense, at worst fourth. And it really comes down to the fourth spot. I think if we're able to bring in at least those three deals we spoke about and not look like an infirmary during one of the world wars, we'll probably end up fourth. If not, then I actually like I'm not hugely bullish on Chelsea. I just don't understand exactly what they're building, which I think as we've been saying for the last couple of years, but more specifically, I don't see enough with like Maresca as like press. He still seems to be playing a mid block with the teams that he's got and the players that he's got, which doesn't seem to make sense.
yeah.
So I think I would probably go for you know City slash Arsenal, Liverpool, United if we can actually get those three deals across the line. That would probably be my top four. I think with Spurs, there's still like a couple of question marks on like just depth. And there's that question of like what happens if Son actually starts to decline. People have been saying he's been declined for the last couple of years, but he's got enough to his game that he's been
Yeah,
able to like retool it. But they're actually surprisingly reliant on him. So that's another question to be asked.
right. That's interesting. From my end, and I said this last year as well at the start of the season, I was actually bullish on Liverpool last year for the league. And for a large part of it, you could tell they were in the mix. And then there was a drop off, which ironically came from those two United games. Uh, I feel Liverpool. Uh, I think it's going to be between Liverpool and Arsenal this year. I know it's stupid thing to do, writing off City, as like people have done every year, and just they've gone to be proven wrong by the end of the season. I genuinely feel Arsenal, just given how consistent they were, maybe a couple of big games and some results like the Villa one, I think really kind of broke their morale like going into that title run. But again, like even despite that, I felt like their quality of play, the players that they're bringing in, I think that's a solid project. So I'm going with Arsenal or Liverpool because I feel Liverpool have the team. And I think with Slot bringing in new ideas, I think they're going to be even deadlier on the ball. Again, it looks like they've been working on their set pieces, something they were typically good at as well. And maybe a couple of more signings at the top of the field could really kind of revitalize that attack and just make them lethal. I feel like they have a great setup. Maybe midfield, I would think they could use some more muscle in there, but um, I think Liverpool are like you'd be dumb to write them off. I just feel like they have a really exciting team. I think City will be in the mix. I think there might be a bit of a drop off. I have them finishing third, and fourth actually. If it kills me to say this, but I'm going with Villa. I think we're uh, just given how we've had like these injuries come up. I just don't think we'll be able to keep up if that continues. there's something inside me, and I've been a bit of a pessimist with United, so that I don't end up being disappointed at the end of the year. But I just feel like, again, I think we'll see a lot of positives through the year. I just don't think we'll see enough to make the top four over 38 games. So again, I don't think that's the end of the world for this club, for this, even for Ten Hag's project. Even a cup to go along with that. Like, I think Europa League could be like a serious ambition to have this year, right? Like, let's really go for that. And Ten Hag's proven that in cup competitions, like, he can get things right. He can get us playing and win those important games. So I think we might miss out on top four. Unless like we make those additions that we've been talking about, then I think I'll probably take a look at that again in September. But I feel like that's my top four. And I'm happy to be proven wrong if United do that. That's just how I've always been. So yeah, that's what I'm going for with my top four for the league. And pretty sure we might have a different list come September.
And come the end of the transfer market, right? Like that's always
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, come the end of the transfer market. So let's see. I think I'm curious to know everyone else's thoughts as well. I love kind of seeing how people see the different squads, the different teams, how they're playing. I know Chelsea, again, like, it's one of those difficult ones, right? Like, you feel like they don't have a plan, and suddenly they do, but they do have the talent. So it might just take getting like a couple of games where the squad clicks, you have some consistency building. It's just they need to get rid of so many of them.
I would just actually, the irony there is actually think if Pochettino had stayed, I would say they were going to make top four for sure.
Yeah.
And that's the irony, right? It feels like they almost shot something that was starting to work.
Yeah.
And kind of, but again, it's good for the league,
Chelsea,
I think, right?
That's Chelsea for you.
It just feel a little bit like, they're a venture capitalist fund that's trying to, like, invest in enough talent that you either have one that works out, that gives you outsized benefit, but that's not really how like football squads are built. It's not about scattergun.
I agree. But as I said, curious to know everyone else's thoughts. Please let us know in the comments. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. We'll be chatting again post the Community Shield, hopefully in a good mood, in a positive mood. Just we've had some luck against City at Wembley, if you remember, a few months back. So would love to kind of see that like, more of the first team players involved in that game. I know we've had some misses with the busy Euros and Copa. Really looking forward to seeing a decently put together fit squad in that game, and hopefully we start the campaign with a win. But yeah, we'll be here.
I hope we start Diallo. That's all I actually care about, right? Like, and rest of it we can figure out as the campaign goes.
But yeah, excited to see it. Right wing spot. Yeah, but no, we again, we're really excited to do this. For us, it's just a way to kind of again share what we think and kind of get your thoughts as well. We want this to be like a community-driven, fan-driven kind of platform, more than just the two United fans blabbering away, which I think the world has enough of anyway. So let us know what you thought of this piece, and curious to know your thoughts about what you think the season's going to look like going forward. But yeah, we'll be here next week talking the Community Shield, talking the start of the Premier League season. So have a great week ahead, folks, and let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you.